Loretta's mother's favorite tune was the Londonderry Air Danny Boy, and I've decided to put a little introduction in front of it.
Welcome, everybody. Today's summer song is from Loretta Brown. She has been a GNUUC member for 21 years. Loretta will talk today about her family and their involvement in the polio epidemic in the 1950s and capture her thoughts regarding the true heroes in an epidemic. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tina Conti. I will be your service coordinator today. Let's begin by lighting our chalice. Our chalice lighting words today are by Atticus Palmer. We call this light before us and hope that we may always remain a strong community, working together to make the world a better place. When we are grieving or sad, when we are challenged, when we need help, this flame guides us out of the darkness. When we are cheerful, when we celebrate, when we accomplish a great task, when we return to a place that makes us happy, the chalice reminds us to share our happiness with others. Welcome, everybody. Our virtual services run more smoothly every Sunday, but just in case there is a glitch, please know that someone is working to quickly correct it. The service is being live streamed to YouTube and is being recorded to folks who would like to view it later. While we may be physically distant, please know that Greater Nashville UU is here to support you. Reach out to our minister, Reverend Cynthia Kane, by email. That's cyncain@gnuuc.org, or cell phone 859-221-3034. And if you're visiting us, please email us, gnuuc@gnuuc.org, and we'll add you to the list so that you can join us for events in the future and learn more about our congregation. Now let us worship together. As people have As people who have chosen to gather virtually together today, we have the opportunity to recommit to each other and our world with our covenant. If these words hold truth for you, please join me in reading them. We covenant together to make a welcoming community, to walk together in the way of truth and love, to seek the life of the Spirit, and it is known by each person, to support each other in thought, word, and deed as we work to build a better world. Now we're going to go into our Time for All Sages story. This video is from Alan Watts, titled The Dream of Life. Alan Watts was a British writer and speaker known for interpreting and popularizing Buddhism, Taoism, and Hinduism for those of us living in the Western world. He wrote more than 25 books and articles on religion and philosophy. He left us with tons of quotes to ponder, like, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. And the only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. Enjoy.
If you awaken from this illusion, and you understand that black implies white, self implies other, life implies death, or shall I say, death implies life, you can feel yourself not as a stranger in the world, not as something here on probation, not as something that has arrived here by fluke, but you can begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental. I'm not trying to sell you on this idea in the sense of converting you to it. I want you to play with it. I want you to think of its possibilities. I'm not trying to prove it. I'm just putting it forward as a possibility of life to think about. So then, let's suppose that you were able every night to dream any dream you wanted to dream. And that you could, for example, have the power within one night to dream 75 years of time, or any length of time you wanted to have. And you would naturally, as you began on this adventure of dreams, you would fulfill all your wishes. You would have every kind of pleasure you could conceive. And after several nights of 75 years of total pleasure each, you would say, well, that was pretty great. But now let's have a surprise. Let's have a dream which isn't under control. Well, something is going to happen to me that I don't know what it's going to be. And you would dig that and come out of that and say, wow, that was a close shave, wasn't it? And then you would get more and more adventurous, and you would make further and further out gambles as to what you would dream. And finally, you would dream where you are now. You would dream the dream of living the life that you are actually living today. That would be within the infinite multiplicity of choices you would have, of playing that you weren't God. Because the whole nature of the Godhead, according to this idea, is to play that he's not. So in this idea then, everybody is fundamentally the ultimate reality. Not God in a politically kingly sense, but God in the sense of being the self, the deep down basic whatever there is. And you're all that, only you're pretending you're not.
July Share the Plate is Black Lives Matter. These words were taken from blacklivesmatter.com/her story. Black Lives Matter is an ideological political intervention in a world where Black lives are systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. It is an affirmation of Black folks' humanity, our contributions to society, to this society, and our resilience in the face of deadly oppression. What goes to Share the Plate? Half of the checks made out to GNUUC with memo Share the Plate. Half of the online donations tagged with account Share the Plate. Online donations can be made via Breeze, NashvilleU.org, or even text. For those of you supporting this congregation with a recurring pledge through Breeze, thank you so much. You make your own life simpler and our planning much more agile. For those who haven't done that yet, you have 3 ways to contribute right now. You can mail your paper check to GNUUC, 374 Hicks Road, Nashville, Tennessee, 37221. With pledge or share the plate in the memo line, or you can visit nashvilleuu.org/donate, or you can send a text to 615-246-5553 with the amount in the account. Thank you so much. Now, Amelie will play for us. Thank you, Amelie. And now for the meditation. I'm going to read these words. It's a meditation on letting go by Carol Almond Morton. After I read this, I would like to take a moment of silence. I feel as if these words were written for us today. I stumbled upon this and thought this was meant to be. So here we go. Many of us carry a burden of worry, anxiety over the state of the world, worries about money, about our environment, our families, about peace and justice. May we trust that nothing will get worse for us putting that burden down for a moment. May we let go of what weighs us down. May we find that we can set down worry for longer and longer periods of time. In our experience of letting go, may we be open to the possibility that we need not pick our worries back up. May we find passion and strength to work for change where we have the power to do so, and to let go where we do not. If not forever, let us put down any worries or anxiety for our time of quiet. May we be in quiet together. And as the moment passes, there's outside noises that just sort of meld in with what's going on. And now Loretta Brown. Thank you, Loretta, for sharing with us today.
Hello. My sharing today is really a story of my parents and the roots that they established for my family in the middle of the polio epidemic. It's also a story of the medical researchers and virologists who worked diligently on the path to finding a cure for this horrible disease. I think of my parents daily during this awful COVID-19 pandemic, and I know that they would be horrified at the inattention of many people to protecting themselves and others. They also would be baffled by the lack of respect shown to the medical experts seeking to guide our government leaders. I thought that a brief overview of the polio epidemic and the lives of a few committed individuals would bring a touch of reality and humanity to our present chaos. There have been cycles of disease and epidemics throughout time, with heroic people involved in each one, people who acted with strength, intelligence, resilience, love, and hope, people who respected the scientific process. Two of these individuals were my parents, Jack and Rita McGee. My father, who was originally from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, began work as the North Carolina director of the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, now the March of Dimes, in the late 1940s. He was in the Navy in World War II and was fresh out of the University of North Carolina, so he was ready to make his mark on the world. The polio epidemic was raging in the 1940s and 1950s in North Carolina. North Carolina was among many areas that were being hit hard. President Franklin Roosevelt, an adult victim of polio, founded the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis in 1938. A predominantly childhood disease in the early 20th century, polio wreaked havoc among American children every summer. The National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis was set up as a nonpartisan association of health scientists and volunteers that helped fund research for a polio virus and to provide victims on the long path through physical rehabilitation with needed help. Funded originally through the generosity of wealthy celebrities, the foundation could not raise money fast enough to keep pace with the toll that polio was taking on our country. President Roosevelt decided to appeal to the public for financial assistance, and a celebrity singer, Eddie Cantor, urged the public to send their dimes to the president, hence the new name March of Dimes. In 1941, the March of Dimes funded the development of an improved iron lung, which helped polio patients breathe when muscle control was lost. Sadly, Roosevelt died in 1945, so he did not get to see the birth of the polio vaccine in 1955. Briefly, polio, or poliomyelitis, is a disabling and life-threatening disease caused by the polio virus. It is easily spread person to person and can infect a person's spinal cord, causing varying degrees of paralysis. Most people who get infected, 72 out of 100, will be asymptomatic. About 1 out of 4 people will have flu-like symptoms. A smaller percentage of people will develop more serious symptoms that affect their brain and the spinal cord. This can cause paresthesias, which are feelings like pins and needles in the extremities, meningitis, an infection of the covering of the spinal cord and or brain that occurs in about 1 out of 25 people with a poliovirus infection, and paralysis, the inability to move parts of the body, or weakness in the arms, legs, or both that occurs in about 1 out of 200 people with the infection. Paralysis is the most severe symptom since it can lead to permanent disability and death. The paralysis can affect the respiratory muscles, requiring assistance with ventilation. Iron lungs were developed to assist people who could no longer breathe on their own. They were also known as tank ventilators. They were a type of negative pressure ventilator, a mechanical respirator which encloses most of a person's body and varies the air pressure in the enclosed space to simulate breathing. On the side of an iron lung, a motorized lever pulls the leather bellows, creating negative pressure that induces the lungs to suck in air. Many of the patients who had to be placed in iron lungs described it as being like living in a 700-pound canister. Their head was out of the canister and a mirror was placed over their head so that they could see their surroundings and people talking to them. They could freely speak with their family and caregiver. By 2018, there were only 3 people in the United States still using an iron lung. Mona Randolph, who was 82 and had been infected with polio in 1956. Martha Lillard, age 69, who contracted polio in 1953 at the age of 5, and Paul Alexander, age 70, who contracted polio in 1952 at the age of 6. Friends and family helped them maintain their iron lungs. As children who had been infected with the virus grew up, it was found that many later developed post-polio syndrome as an adult, experiencing muscle pain, weakness, and paralysis. The polio virus lives in a person's throat and intestines. It is therefore transmitted through contact with feces or droplets spread from a sneeze or cough by an infected person. An infected person can spread the virus immediately before and up to 2 weeks after symptoms occur. Dr. Jonas Salk, an American virologist and medical researcher, was born in 1914 and passed away in 1995. He was the oldest son of Russian Jewish immigrants and was the first person in his family to graduate from college. He earned his medical degree from the NYU School of Medicine in 1939 and became a scientist physician at Mount Sinai Hospital. In 1942, Dr. Salk went to the University of Michigan on a research fellowship to develop an influenza vaccine. He quickly advanced to the position of Associate Professor of Epidemiology. During this time period, he also reconnected with his NYU friend and mentor, Dr. Thomas Francis Jr., head of the Epidemiology Department at Michigan's School of Public Health, who taught him the methodology of vaccine development. In 1947, Dr. Salk became the director of the Virus Research Laboratory at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. With funding from the March of Dimes, he began to develop the techniques that would lead to a vaccine that would wipe out polio. During the course of his research, Dr. Salk finally concluded that his vaccine, composed of quote-unquote killed poliovirus, could immunize without risk of infection to the patient. He administered the vaccine to volunteers who had not had polio, including himself, his wife, and their three sons, Peter, Daryl, and Jonathan. All developed anti-polio antibodies with no negative reactions to the vaccine. Further national testing was done in 1954 on 1 million children. On April 12, 1955, the results were announced nationally that a safe and effective polio vaccine had been found. This was the result of 6 years of research. Dr. Salk declined to patent the vaccine. He told Edward R. Murrow in an interview at that time that the vaccine is like the sun. No one can patent the sun, and I should not patent this vaccine because it belongs to everyone. The vaccine proved to be very effective. In the early 1950s, polio outbreaks caused more than 15,000 cases of paralysis each year. Following the introduction of the vaccine in 1955 and the introduction of the oral poliovirus vaccine developed by Dr. Albert Sabin in 1963, the number of polio cases fell rapidly to less than 100 in the 1960s and fewer than 10 in the 1970s. The U.S. has been polio-free since 1979. Since the oral poliovirus vaccine was found to occasionally cause cases of paralysis, its usage stopped in 2000. The oral vaccine, however, did help eradicate the disease in many nations. So back to my dad, who was working all over North Carolina to educate the public regarding polio, help provide funding for equipment, and seek funds for continued research and development of the polio vaccine. He also visited with medical staff providing support services in the area. In 1948, my mother, Rita Moriarty, was brought from a station hospital in California to provide nursing services at a new emergency polio hospital in Greensboro, North Carolina, an area which was seeing a huge surge in cases. She worked in that hospital helping to handle many patients who were critically ill and in iron lungs. The work was physically and emotionally exhausting, and the care was exceptional. When the power went out, and try to picture this, close your eyes and picture this, the staff had to manually keep the bellows going on all of the iron lungs. My mother also helped educate the families of the victims and the public about polio and its prevention. All were awaiting a polio vaccine in those dark days of 1948. My mother and father met when they both arrived to present an educational session, and that was it. They fell in love and they married in early 1951 and relocated to Raleigh, North Carolina. I was born in the summer of 1951, and my sister Eileen was born in 1953. So to give some context, the worst year for the polio epidemic was 1952. My dad was busy all over the state with ongoing fundraisers, and he did speak occasionally with Dr. Salk and the research team in Pittsburgh. Both he and my mother continued to help educate the public and anything else needed to help the effort. Both of them would tell us stories about all the patients and their families and about the families of the researchers whom they had grown to know. When the development of the final safe polio vaccine was announced, I can remember my parents dancing in the living room. The announcement was a gift to a couple who had seen so much pain and death. Mother dressed us up in our Sunday best when they took us for our first polio vaccine. It was a time of celebration. My father continued his hard work as the epidemic slowed and life moved to a more normal pace. When Eileen and I were a little older, we would ride the back roads of North Carolina with my dad, visiting patients in iron lungs in their homes. The first time I visited a patient in an iron lung, it was very frightening because when you walk in, there's a huge, it looks like a long can on the floor, and there is a head sticking out of one end and a mirror above it, so eyes are looking at you when you come in the room. So I quickly got over that. The man in the iron lung called me over and told me all about it, so things were fine after that, but they could be very frightening to see the first time. For patients living in secluded situations, our presence provided them with great joy. We also helped him bring supplies to small regional offices of the March of Dimes. We helped with local fundraising events and watched our father doing interviews with the media. Our favorite project was helping him set up the March of Dimes exhibit at the North Carolina State Fair every year. We even got to meet Roy Rogers and Trigger one year, since they were being featured at the fair's rodeo. Over the years, I had two more sisters, Christine and Ann, and my brother Brian, born into the family. Sadly, they all were diagnosed with severe birth defects, including mental retardation and cystic fibrosis, as well as significant other physical problems. My mother cared for them as long as she could at home, with myself and my sister assisting as possible, and they went into homes for the mentally retarded at that point. All passed away by the age of 16. My father continued to work for the March of Dimes for 35 years. My mother returned to nursing in her 50s. Our daughter, Kristen, remembers traveling with my father on many trips around the state as well when she was young, continuing attention to women's and children's health issues as he did. Even after Dad retired, he continued to visit the state legislature to lobby for women's and children's issues. My mother passed away in 2004. My father passed away in April of this year after dealing a number of years with senile dementia. If he heard anyone discussing a virus in the facility, his mind immediately connected and he would remind everyone to get their vaccines since old diseases can recur. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. Salk was, "Hope lies in dreams, in imagination, and in the courage of those who dare to make dreams a reality." As you survive this stressful time, please remember all of the heroes involved in this epidemic and past epidemics. You have the power to make a difference every day. Be a positive and an intelligent influence. Explain the importance of wearing a mask, as well as taking the new vaccine when it is developed. People like my parents are working all over the world to resolve this epidemic. These are the true heroes. Thank you.
I'm going to play McPherson's Lament in honor of everybody who's passed away so far this year. Loretta's sister passed away recently, and this was her favorite tune I played.
Beautiful, John. Thank you so much. Jesse is going to lead us now in Joys and Concerns.
We take time every Sunday to share the joys and sorrows which have shaped our week. To do that here, I'd like to ask you to raise your hand, your actual hand. Let me know that you'd like to speak, and then I'll call on you, and then you'll be able to unmute and share. Do keep in mind that we are live streaming as well on YouTube and also recording. So just keep that in mind as we share. And I see Doug.
Yes, I thought of saying something, a joy for my parents' 73rd anniversary. Neither of my parents are still living, but having heard Loretta's homily and us in the pandemic, this intersection kind of behooves me to say something. My mom was a nurse in World War II, and she served in a veterans hospital. And she met my dad after the end of World War II, and they got married, and he expressed concern to her that she was working in part with patients who had tuberculosis. And she persisted, saying that there were precautions that could be taken to not catch tuberculosis by the nurse. But it turned out she did catch tuberculosis, and she had to leave her work in nursing and suffer for, I think, several years being treated for the symptoms of tuberculosis. And then if a medical breakthrough came through that, in this case, would allow the lobe of her lung that was infected with the tuberculosis to be removed. And therefore, she was able to survive after that. And that was how, I wouldn't have been here if she hadn't survived that process. And also, I would have had younger parents. They were relatively older because they waited to have children. And I'd often have people, when I was with my parents, referred to grandfather or grandmother rather than my mom or dad. So anyway, I'm grateful for survival, and I have a special connection for maintaining precautions to not catch diseases. So thank you.
Thank you, Doug, for sharing. I light a candle. in recognition of your parents' anniversary.
See, I see Thina. Thina, you can unmute.
So first of all, thank you, Loretta. That was really both informative and moving. And you know, you're just such a joy to listen to anyway. I want to talk about a joy that I have. Imani's father is here visiting with us. We haven't seen him since 2006. And you guys have all heard the legacy, his path. He's been imprisoned for 12 years. He's a survivor of lung cancer, and you know, really working to rebuild his life. And we're just so joyous to have him here with us. He's just wonderful. We're very happy he's here. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Thina. Light a candle in your celebration.
I see Denise. Denise, you're unmuted.
Yes. Thank you. Althea Burstein is a young biracial Jewish and UU woman. On June 24th in Madison, Wisconsin, Althea was intentionally burned when she was the victim of a racist attack by three white men out Althea today.
And Denise, just so you know, you broke up a little bit. If you want to stop your video and to share the story of Althea just one more time, we'll be able to hear it this time, I believe.
I can. I don't know how to stop my video. Oh, here we go. Got it. Okay, let me begin again, please. Althea Bernstein is a young biracial Jewish and UU woman. On June 24th in Madison, Wisconsin, Althea was intentionally burned when she was the victim of a racist attack by three white men. Let's be thinking about Althea today.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Denise. I light a candle in our shared concern for Althea.
Charles, I see you, and you can unmute now.
My youngest daughter works at Nashville General Hospital in ear, nose, and throat. And as a consequence, she has quite a lot of exposure to patients who come in. A lot of them come from prisons and low-income families. She's been isolating in the basement of her house because her daughter and husband don't want to get infected from her. Now my daughter has broken her ankle, and so she has that other complication to face. So just thoughts for my daughter, Wendy.
Thank you for sharing. We'll keep your daughter in our thoughts.
Please raise your hand if you'd like to share. Then we'll light one more candle for all the joys and concerns too deeply held to be shared. We can join together in singing For All That Is Our Life, in number 128, and the words will be on your screen.
sing our thanks and praise for all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
I'm going to try this. I have to apologize. We have some background distractions right now. This is our chalice extinguishing time. Please join me, and the words are in the chat window. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in and among us now and always. And our closing words today are going to be once again from Alan Watts. This is the real secret of life, to be completely engaged with what you are doing in the here and now. And instead of calling it work, realize it is play.
We'll now enter into a time of conversation. We'll have an opportunity to have our regular coffee Sunday chat if you'd like, or if you'd like to stay in this main room and speak with Loretta a little bit more in depth about what she shared today. And I'd like to actually just personally say to Loretta, thank you so much for sharing today. That was really deeply meaningful and lovely. And also would like to thank Tina for being service coordinator today and doing such a beautiful job. Well done. If you're interested in coffee chit chat, just the regular coffee time, go ahead and raise your hand. And what I'll do is I will create a virtual room for you. It'll take me just a moment to create that. If you're interested in coffee chat, go ahead and, oops, I've made a mistake. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand again in just one moment. And then I'll be unmuting everyone as well. Let's see. Okay, great. Okay, great. So yes, if you would raise your hand. So Mary, I see that you're going to go into the coffee chat room. And I also see Bob, you'll go into the coffee chat room. Karen, I see you going into the coffee chat room. Sandy, I see you. I'll send you over there. Let's see. Let me move this out of the way. Who else is interested in going into the coffee chat room?
Jesse, are we still live?
Oh, and actually we are. Let me go ahead and cancel that.